The investigation found that the failures at the Richmond water treatment plant were not as the result of a day of disaster, but a years-long neglect. The report details that this water crisis was completely avoidable and should not have happened. The state is cracking down on how Richmond has been running their water treatment plant. The practices are analyzed under a magnifying glass after thousands of Central Virginians were impacted by the plant going down for days back in January. The Virginia Department of Health's Office of Drinking Water, or ODW, announced Wednesday that they're issuing a notice of alleged violation. It comes after they dropped the findings of failures in a 300-page report that details that the water crisis should have never happened. They call the failures not the result of a day of disaster, but rather years-long neglect, and say their findings are in contrast to the city's report. ODW found DPU made 3 critical errors in operational decisions that caused the water crisis. First, that the water treatment plant was operating in winter mode as a cost-saving measure. It essentially created a single point of failure with no redundancy. Next, that DPU has known for decades that flooding was a risk, but did not take actions to maintain backup systems. They state this failure could have been avoided had DPU properly tested, maintained, and replaced equipment every 3 to 5 years. Finally, they state that DPU allowed the plant to be overly reliant on manual operation. Investigators also identified what they call significant cultural, operational, procedural, and engineering failures. They detail that systemic, institutional, and organizational factors led to the water crisis, and that DPU allowed situations to exist that increased the risk of the water crisis. They detail how they observed lack of maintenance, lack of properly trained and skilled staff, lack of standard operating procedures, and lack of sufficient training for emergency response. They said they found that DPU did not elevate concerns and did not create an environment of pride, care, and ownership of problems. They write, quote, DPU management and leadership allowed a complacent and reactive culture to persist. Known problems and flooding risks were not addressed or were allowed to exist for extended periods of time. Adding, quote, this complacent cultural mindset increased the risk of the water crisis. The report recommends $64 million of system upgrades, operational practice changes, and reducing vulnerabilities. The health commissioner added that the city legally started diverting funding away from the water treatment plant in 2006 into the general fund. However, she states some of the recommendations for funding are likely in the city's capital improvement plan. Governor Glenn Youngkin, who called on the VDH to conduct this investigation, issued a statement in response to the findings. He says this incident should never have happened, and he's calling on the VDH to ensure the city takes the steps so it doesn't again. And we're waiting to hear back from the city in response to the report. However, they have since replaced critical UPS systems and stopped operating in winter mode. They've also changed key management and leadership positions. In the studio tonight, I'm Maggie Marshall for CBS 6.